The world is full of places where things disappear without explanation. A plane takes off never to land. A ship leaves port, yet no trace of it is ever found. Sometimes wreckage is discovered in distant waters, raising more questions than answers. Other times, all that remains is silence. For centuries, the seas and skies have swallowed vessels and their crews, leaving behind stories that blur the line between fact and legend. Some vanishings have logical explanations: storms, mechanical failures, human error, but others defy reason. Entire crews have disappeared from ships without signs of struggle. Aircraft have vanished mid-flight with no distress calls, their last moments an unsolvable riddle. What happened to them? Did they fall victim to forces beyond our understanding, or are the answers simply waiting to be uncovered? As we explore some of history's most chilling disappearances, one truth remains: the vast unknown still holds its secrets. On the night of March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 departed from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 0:41 local time, bound for Beijing. The Boeing 777-200ER carried 239 passengers and crew, following a routine flight path. The weather was clear, communication was normal, and nothing suggested the flight would become one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. At 1:19, as MH370 was leaving Malaysian airspace and preparing to enter Vietnamese-controlled airspace, the co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid, transmitted the final known words from the cockpit: "Good night, Malaysian 370. Minutes later, the aircraft's transponder, which broadcasts its location to ground radar, was switched off. The plane then made an unexpected left turn, diverting from its scheduled path. This was the moment everything changed. Despite losing contact with civilian radar, military installations picked up an unidentified aircraft making a sharp turn westward. Later confirmed as MH370, it flew back over Malaysia, crossed the Malacca Strait, and then turned southwest, heading into the vast emptiness of the Indian Ocean. But why? There was no distress call, no sign of mechanical failure, and no communication from the pilots. It was as if the plane had deliberately disappeared. When MH370 failed to arrive in Beijing, a massive search operation began. Authorities initially focused on the South China Sea, assuming a mid-flight disaster. But as military radar data was analyzed, it became clear that MH370 had traveled far off course. The search shifted to the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote and unforgiving places on Earth. The effort became the largest and most expensive in aviation history, covering 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor. But despite years of sonar scanning, the wreckage was never found. The first real clue surfaced in 2015 when a piece of the plane, a flaperon, washed up on Reunion Island, thousands of kilometers away. It confirmed that the aircraft had ended up in the Indian Ocean, but how it got there remained a mystery. Over time, more debris appeared along the coasts of Africa, Madagascar, and nearby islands, yet none of it provided answers to the plane's fate. Without clear evidence, theories emerged. Some believed it was a mechanical failure, but why didn't the pilot send a distress signal? A sudden decompression could have rendered everyone unconscious, leaving the plane to fly on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. Others suspected foul play. Was it a deliberate act by the pilot, Zahari Ahmad Shah, in a planned suicide mission? No conclusive proof supported this. More speculative theories suggested hijacking, cyber interference, or even military involvement. Was the plane intercepted and covered up? Did something force it off course? With so many unknowns, speculation ran wild. Despite years of advanced sonar searches, the wreckage of MH370 remains undiscovered. In 2018, a renewed private search by Ocean Infinity also ended without success. The disappearance of MH370 remains one of the most confounding aviation mysteries of all time. But it is not the only case of a plane seemingly vanishing into thin air. Some disappearances are so bizarre they sound impossible, like the legend of Flight 914, a plane said to have reappeared after decades. A plane takes off, disappears without a trace, and then reappears decades later, as if no time had passed. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, but this is the legend of Flight 914, a story that has captivated conspiracy theorists and mystery seekers for years. According to the tale, a Douglas DC-4 airliner departed from New York on July 2, 1955, bound for Miami, with 57 passengers and 4 crew members on board. The weather was clear. The flight was routine until it wasn't. Somewhere along the way, the aircraft simply vanished. There were no distress calls, No wreckage and no explanations. Air traffic control searched for answers, but none came. The plane was presumed lost, another tragic case of aviation disaster. Then, according to the legend, 37 years later, on September 9, 1992, air traffic controllers at Caracas International Airport, Venezuela, picked up an unidentified aircraft on their radar. It had seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Confused, the control tower attempted to make contact. The response that came back was impossible. An unfamiliar voice identified the flight as Pan American Airways 914, the same aircraft that had disappeared decades earlier. The plane was said to have landed, and when airport staff approached, they found a crew and passengers who still believed it was 1955. Their clothing, their luggage, even their currency were decades out of date. The pilot, allegedly realizing something was terribly wrong, quickly restarted the engines and took off again before authorities could stop him. Some versions of the story claim the plane disappeared for good, never to be seen again. Others say it reappeared elsewhere, perhaps landing in an undisclosed location hidden from the public eye. Whichever version is told, one eerie detail remains the same. The passengers were untouched by time. For decades, the mystery of Flight 914 spread through books, magazines, and later, the internet. It was whispered about in paranormal circles, cited as evidence of time warps, parallel dimensions, or government cover-ups. Some pointed to alleged eyewitness accounts, while others claimed that newspaper archives held the truth. A single grainy black and white newspaper clipping often surfaces as proof, showing a headline about the plane's return. But when researchers dug deeper, the cracks in the story became obvious. The first known mention of Flight 914 appeared in 1960s tabloid magazines, particularly a sensationalist publication known for fabricated stories. The details changed over time, the plane's flight number, the dates, the location of reappearance, shifting with each retelling. No official airline records mention such a flight. No missing persons reports match the names supposedly on board. And despite claims of newspapers reporting the event, no credible source has ever been found. The famous clipping is nothing more than an altered tabloid article. Yet, despite being debunked, the legend refuses to die. It thrives on mystery, feeding into humanity's fascination with the unexplained, lost time, and impossible disappearances. Some believe stories like this contain a kernel of truth, distorted over time. Others see them as cautionary tales, warning of hidden forces at play in the world. And while Flight 914 may be nothing more than a fabrication, history has no shortage of real, unsolved disappearances, cases where ships and planes vanished without explanation, leaving behind only questions. Unlike the myth of Flight 914, some disappearances leave behind real, haunting mysteries, such as that of the USS Cyclops, a massive Navy ship swallowed by the Bermuda Triangle, never to be seen again. Few disappearances are as unsettling as that of the USS Cyclops, a 19,000-ton naval collier that vanished without a trace in 1918, taking 309 men with it. The ship was part of the U.S. Navy's fleet, responsible for carrying coal to fuel warships. It was massive, nearly 170 meters long, capable of carrying thousands of tons of cargo. Yet despite its size, no distress call was ever sent, no wreckage was ever found, and no definitive explanation has ever surfaced. It is to this day one of the greatest maritime disappearances in history. The Cyclops departed from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on February 16, 1918, loaded with manganese ore bound for Baltimore, Maryland. Along the way, it made an unscheduled stop in Barbados for supplies. Witnesses at the port noted that the ship was sitting unusually low in the water, likely due to its heavy cargo. The crew reported engine troubles, but the captain, George Worley, chose to continue the voyage. On March 4, 1918, the Cyclops left Barbados heading north. It was expected to arrive in Baltimore within days. It never did. What makes this case so disturbing is the absolute lack of evidence. No distress signal was sent, and no ships in the area reported spotting the Cyclops. Even after an extensive search by the Navy, not a single piece of debris, lifeboat, or body was ever recovered. It was as if the ship had simply been erased from existence. Over the years, theories have attempted to explain its fate. Some speculate that structural weaknesses in the ship, worsened by the heavy manganese cargo, caused it to break apart in rough seas. Others suggest it was a victim of German U-boats, as World War I was raging at the time, though no German records indicate such an attack. Some even believe Captain Worley himself, A man with a reputation for erratic behavior and suspected German sympathies may have deliberately sabotaged the voyage. But none of these theories fully explain why such a massive ship disappeared without leaving a single clue. The USS Cyclops vanished in an area now infamous for unexplained disappearances, the Bermuda Triangle. This vast expanse of ocean, stretching between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, has long been associated with mysterious vanishings of ships and aircraft. Some claim magnetic anomalies, rogue waves, or unknown natural forces played a role in the Cyclops' fate. Others entertain supernatural explanations, believing the ship was lost to some unknown force lurking in the triangle. Whatever the cause, one chilling fact remains. The Cyclops was not the last US Navy ship to vanish in the same region. In later years, two of its sister ships, the USS Nereus and USS Proteus, also disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Like the Cyclops, they were carrying heavy ore. Like the Cyclops, they were lost without a trace. The disappearance of the USS Cyclops remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history, a haunting reminder of how even the largest vessels can simply cease to exist. But some disappearances don't begin in silence. They erupt in battle like HMAS Sydney, a warship lost at sea with all 645 men aboard. During World War II, warships were built to withstand the most extreme conditions, battle, storms, and the relentless open sea. But in November 1941, the HMAS Sydney, one of Australia's most formidable light cruisers, vanished without a single survivor. 645 men lost, no distress signal sent, no clear explanation. It would take nearly 7 decades before the mystery of its fate was finally uncovered. The Sydney was a powerful and battle-hardened warship, nearly 172 meters long, armed with 8 152 mm guns, torpedo tubes, and anti-aircraft weapons. It had already earned a fearsome reputation, having played a decisive role in the Battle of the Mediterranean. In November 1941, it was returning from escort duty in Southeast Asia when it encountered what appeared to be a merchant vessel off the coast of Western Australia. The ship identified itself as the Straat Malacca, a Dutch freighter, but something wasn't right. The vessel didn't respond properly to signals, and as the Sydney got closer, too close, the trap was sprung. The supposed freighter was no merchant ship at all. It was the Cormoran, a German raider, heavily armed and disguised to lure unsuspecting warships into deadly encounters. At point-blank range, the Cormoran unleashed its full arsenal. Shells tore through Sydney's bridge, communications and turrets in seconds, rendering it nearly defenseless. The Australian cruiser fought back, inflicting fatal damage on the German ship, but the damage to Sydney was catastrophic. Eyewitnesses from the Cormoran, who later survived, reported that the Sydney drifted away, engulfed in flames, before disappearing beyond the horizon. It was never seen again. For decades, the mystery deepened. The wreckage remained missing, and not a single crew member survived to tell the story. The lack of survivors was particularly eerie. Why had no one escaped in lifeboats? While the Cormoran's crew had time to abandon ship, the Sydney seemed to vanish completely. Search efforts found nothing, and conspiracy theories emerged. Some believed that a Japanese submarine was secretly involved, attacking the Sydney before Japan's official entry into the war. Others suspected the German account was false, that survivors had been executed, or that the ship had been secretly towed away. But without evidence, these theories remained speculation. Then, in 2008, after decades of searching, the wreck of HMAS Sydney was finally discovered 2,500 meters below the surface, off the coast of Western Australia. The wreckage revealed the truth. The Sydney had suffered a direct hit to its magazine, causing a massive explosion. The ship had drifted for hours, before eventually sinking into the abyss. The reason for no survivors became clear. With its lifeboats destroyed and the ship taking on water, no one had a chance to escape. Even with the wreck found, the Sydney remains one of World War II's most haunting maritime disasters. The way it was lured into a fatal encounter, its complete destruction, and the loss of every man aboard make it one of the most devastating naval disappearances in history. But while the Sydney's wreck was eventually found, not all disappearances are ever solved. Some remain complete mysteries, like the case of Felix Moncla, a US pilot who disappeared mid-pursuit of something unidentified in the skies over Lake Superior. On the evening of November 23, 1953, a US Air Force F-89 Scorpion interceptor took off from Kinross Air Force Base, Michigan. Its mission, to investigate an unidentified radar contact moving over Lake Superior near the US-Canada border. In the cockpit were First Lieutenant Felix Moncla, the pilot, and Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson, the radar operator. Within minutes, they were locked onto their target, racing toward it at high speed. Moments later, their aircraft disappeared, without a trace. The radar operators at Kinross watched as the blip representing Moncla's jet closed in on the unknown object. Then, something inexplicable happened. The two radar blips merged into one, and just like that, Moncla's aircraft vanished from the screen. Controllers tried desperately to re-establish contact, but there was only silence. A massive search operation was launched, scouring the icy waters of Lake Superior for any sign of the F-89 or its pilots. No wreckage was found. No distress call was ever sent. It was as if the jet had been swallowed whole by the sky. The US Air Force quickly provided an official explanation. Moncla had likely suffered vertigo, lost control, and crashed into the lake. But this didn't explain why no debris or bodies were ever recovered. More strangely, initial reports suggested that Moncla's aircraft had been chasing a Canadian military plane, an explanation that the Canadian government outright denied. There were no Canadian aircraft in the area that night. This only fueled speculation that Moncla had intercepted something else entirely, something the military didn't want to acknowledge. UFO researchers latched onto the case, suggesting that the object on radar was not another aircraft, but something unknown, something Moncla got too close to. Some even speculated that the two radar blips merging meant that his jet had been taken, whether by accident or by design. Decades later, in 2006, a team of divers claimed to have discovered the wreckage of an F-89 at the bottom of Lake Superior. However, the location and details of the aircraft were never confirmed, and the mystery remains. Whether Moncla was the victim of a tragic accident, an encounter with an unknown craft, or something the government covered up, his disappearance remains one of the most chilling aviation mysteries of the 20th century. But while Moncla's case left behind only questions, some disappearances offer eerie clues. Like the MV Joyita, a ship found abandoned in the Pacific, its crew gone without a trace. Few ghost ships are as unsettling as the MV Joyita, a 43-meter-long merchant vessel that vanished in the South Pacific in 1955, only to be found drifting aimlessly, completely abandoned. The lifeboats were missing. The radio was tuned to an emergency frequency. Supplies were untouched. The 25 passengers and crew were gone without a trace. The Joyita left Apia, Samoa, on October 3, 1955, bound for the Tokelau Islands, a short voyage that should have taken 2 days. Aboard was an experienced captain, Thomas H. Miller, along with traders, government officials, and medical personnel. The ship was overdue by October 5th, but no distress calls had been received. A full search was launched, yet for weeks the Pacific remained silent. Then, on November 10, 1955, a British aircraft spotted the missing vessel, adrift 1,000 kilometers off course near Fiji. When rescuers boarded the ship, what they found was deeply unsettling. The engine was dead. The radio was tuned to an emergency distress channel, but no calls had been made. The ship wasn't sinking. In fact, its design made it nearly unsinkable, yet the crew had seemingly abandoned it anyway. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no bullet holes. Just an empty, broken vessel left to the mercy of the waves. And then came the most haunting detail. The ship's logbook was missing. The navigation equipment gone. The lifeboats cut away. It was as if someone or something had systematically erased the final moments of the voyage. Even more disturbing, a doctor's medical bag was left open, suggesting an injury or illness before the evacuation. But if someone had been hurt, why abandon the ship, especially one that was still afloat? Theories flooded in. Some believed pirates attacked, yet nothing valuable was stolen. Others whispered of Japanese holdouts, soldiers from World War II still hiding on remote islands. There were those who claimed the Joyita encountered something unnatural, an unknown force lurking in the vast Pacific. More rational minds suggested a leak may have caused panic, leading the crew to abandon ship too soon. Yet the vessel was found fully capable of staying afloat. If the crew left voluntarily, why was nothing taken? The bodies were never recovered. No lifeboats ever found. Whatever happened aboard the Joyita in those missing weeks remains an unanswered question, lost to the currents of time. A ship found abandoned, its passengers erased. An unsettling fate shared by another vessel, the Fausto, a fishing boat that would vanish not once but twice under circumstances even stranger than this. Some disappearances defy all logic, but few are as bizarre and unsettling as the case of El Fausto, a small fishing boat that vanished twice, leaving behind only eerie fragments of its final journey. Unlike other ghost ship stories, this wasn't a vessel lost in a storm or swallowed by the sea. It returned, but without its crew, without explanation, and with details that only deepened the mystery. El Fausto was a 13-meter-long wooden fishing boat, operated by three brothers, Ramon, Miguel, and Julio Umpierres, along with a passenger named Manuel Fuentes. On July 20th, 1968, they left the small island of La Palma, part of Spain's Canary Islands, on a routine supply run to El Hierro about 100 kilometers away. It was a short trip, and the boat arrived as planned. After delivering goods, they prepared to return. Then, at the last moment, Fuentes, who hadn't planned to stay aboard, decided to join them for the return trip. That decision sealed their fate. Hours later, El Fausto never arrived. It was a clear day, with calm seas and no bad weather. A full-scale search began, combing the waters between the islands. Days passed. Nothing. The boat, its crew, and the unexpected passenger were simply gone. 8 days later, the impossible happened. A cargo ship, Duquesa, spotted El Fausto adrift 1,500 kilometers away, far beyond its intended route. The ship pulled alongside and saw the three brothers on deck waving for help, but something was wrong. The men looked terrified, as if they had seen something they couldn't explain. The Duquesa's crew threw them a rope, but before they could board, a massive wave pushed El Fausto away. The fishing boat drifted into the distance, refusing to be rescued. The crew of the Duquesa watched, helpless, as the vessel disappeared again, this time for good. Weeks later, El Fausto was found one last time, this time abandoned. It had drifted over 3,200 kilometers into the Atlantic near Venezuela. There was no sign of the crew, only an eerie silence. Inside, investigators found a notebook. The last entry read, "There is nothing, we are dying." The words sent chills through those who read them. They were brief, final, and offered no explanation. There were no signs of struggle, no damage, no clear cause for their disappearance. Had the men suffered from dehydration and madness, abandoning the ship into the unforgiving ocean? If so, why did they refuse rescue when it was within reach? Some believe they were chased by something they could not escape. Others suggest they saw something they were never meant to see. The most unsettling possibility is that the crew knew they were doomed long before the end came, but left no explanation as to why. To this day, not a single body was ever recovered. The sea had swallowed them, leaving behind only their ship, an unanswered message, and a mystery that refuses to fade. The world is filled with disappearances that defy explanation, planes that lift off and are never seen again, ships that sail into the horizon only to return empty and abandoned. Some vanish into the depths of the ocean, where time and tide erase all traces. Others leave behind clues, fragments of wreckage, desperate final messages, only to deepen the mystery. Were they lost to the forces of nature, to human error, or to something beyond our understanding? No matter how much technology advances, some questions remain unanswered. The ocean stretches beyond sight. The sky fades into endless darkness, and in these vast spaces, people still vanish without a trace. Their stories linger, whispered through time, challenging us to uncover the truth. What do you think happened to these missing ships and planes? Were they victims of the natural world, or did something else seal their fate? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper into more unsolved mysteries, check out our other videos. You might just discover something even stranger. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Because out there in the vast unknown, the mysteries are never truly over.